Jack Harmon was only 14, the first time he set foot on the planet with the dual suns, a place that seemed determined to bake any living thing to ashes. His escape pod had malfunctioned during a training voyage with his uncle, a routine trip intended to teach him about life beyond Earth's orbit. Instead of a neat landing near a safe outpost, his pod spiraled out of control through the thin atmosphere of this inhospitable world. He spent almost 2 days stumbling over jagged rocks and scorching sand before collapsing from dehydration. By some small miracle, an automated beacon on the pod sent out an SOS, but it was unclear if anyone would arrive in time. He remembered waking at dawn. The sky glowed a strange orange, and the rocky terrain seemed to smolder with reflected heat. His mouth was so dry he could barely swallow. Hunger gnawed at him, and every muscle ached as if he'd endured a month of boot camp in a single night. He also remembered seeing figures in the distance, 3, perhaps 4, moving with clear intent. Jack's first thought was that they might be rescue workers, but as he crawled to a vantage point behind a large boulder, he realized he was horribly mistaken. They were mercenaries, or at least they dressed the part. Battered armor, lethal weapons strapped to their backs, aggressive postures. And they had someone cornered against a cliff face. A girl, though certainly not a human girl. Even through the shimmering heat, Jack could see that her skin was golden orange, and her hair an unusual silver that caught the sunlight like spun metal. She wore a tight black dress, obviously impractical for the planet's conditions, but it fit her as if it were a second skin. Under different circumstances, Jack might have gawked in fascinated confusion. At that moment, however, all he saw was her fear. The mercenaries surrounded her. One of them grabbed for her arm. She recoiled, pressing herself against the rock wall, but there was nowhere else to go. The boy in Jack's mind, the sensible, frightened boy, wanted to hide. He was only 14. The heat alone was crippling. He had barely enough water to stay alive, and he had no training in combat beyond a few scuffles in school. Still, something pulled him to act. Something in her wide, iridescent eyes reminded him of his own desperate vulnerability. She was alone, and from the menacing laughter of her attackers, they clearly intended to do far worse than rob her. He stood, his knees wobbling, scanning the ground for any weapon. All he found were rocks, smooth but heavy enough to be painful if hurled with force. He remembered reading once that a solid throw could be a formidable distraction, at least. So he scooped up a handful of them, snuck closer to the group, and hurled the first stone at the nearest mercenary. It struck the man squarely in the back of the head. "Hey!" Jack shouted, his voice cracking. "Leave her alone." The mercenary spun around. The one he hit stumbled forward. In that split second, the girl tore free, shifting from fearful victim to graceful fighter. She lashed out with a swift kick, then a flurry of blows. The men hardly knew what hit them. One mercenary lunged for Jack, but Jack scrambled backward, tossing another rock. His aim was poor this time, but it forced the man to dodge. The alien girl took advantage, sweeping the mercenary off his feet. Another attacker tried to grab her, only to be slammed against the cliff with a force that rattled the surrounding stones. When it was over, 3 of the mercenaries lay unconscious, and the 4th fled into the distance. The girl stood there, chest heaving, her silver hair plastered to her neck from sweat. Her skin practically glowed in the dawn light, and she stared at Jack with a mixture of curiosity and astonishment. She said something in a language he didn't understand, her tone questioning. He could only shrug helplessly, try not to sway on his feet. Finally, she spoke in halting but clear human standard. "You help me?" Jack gave a weak grin. "Tried to." Her gaze shifted to the rocks he clutched. "Brave," she murmured. "Foolish, but brave." He wasn't sure what to say. An awkward hush enveloped them. Then she took a few steps forward, close enough that he could see strange markings on her shoulders, faint patterns like lines of liquid metal that pulsed. She brushed his hair aside, an unexpected gesture of intimacy. The contact made him blush. At 14, he had never so much as held hand with a girl back on Earth. "You are only a boy," she observed, voice melodic. "But you risked your life for me." He cleared his throat. I just didn't want them to hurt you." She tilted her head, as if considering this. Then, without warning, she leaned in and pressed her lips softly to his cheek. The sensation was oddly electric. Jack felt his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. She whispered something in his ear he didn't fully catch. He thought it sounded like, "Come back when you're a man. The reward will be worth it." He blinked, stunned, and by the time he managed to piece together a coherent thought, she was already moving away. Moments later, a rescue ship's roar echoed across the landscape. Jack hardly remembered boarding it. All he recalled was the girl's silver hair shimmering under the dual suns and the lingering warmth of her kiss on his cheek. A decade passed, 10 long years in which Jack Harmon never forgot that brief encounter. He often wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. Sometimes it felt like a heat-induced hallucination, but the memory was persistent. The mercenaries, the alien girl's glowing orange skin, the way her eyes, ringed in purple, conveyed a depth of gratitude that went beyond words. Over those 10 years, Jack joined the colonial forces. He proved himself a capable recruit, excelling in survival training, marksmanship, and hand-to-hand combat. During particularly brutal exercises, he'd recall those 3 weeks he spent alone on that scorching planet, waiting for rescue. He'd remember how he had managed to survive on almost no water in deadly heat, and how he had stood up to armed mercenaries with nothing more than handfuls of rocks. That memory carried him through hardships that broke other recruits. He climbed in rank quickly. Fellow soldiers teased him for being distant, always pushing himself to the brink. Jack didn't mind. He had a private reason for his relentless drive. He wanted to return to that world, to find a mysterious alien who had kissed him and whispered that tantalizing invitation. More than once, he woke in the middle of the night from dreams of her. In some dreams, she was in danger, calling him from the edge of his consciousness. In others, she was standing in front of him, older but just as mesmerizing, silently evaluating if he was finally man enough to claim whatever promise she had made. At 24, he felt ready, though he had no idea if she would even be there, or remember him, or if her invitation had meant what he thought. But he had to try. So when the colonial forces gave him a chance to choose his next assignment, he selected a sector near Proxima Centauri b. It took some maneuvering to get clearance to land on a known Australian territory, but eventually official permission was granted. Jack found himself once again in the cockpit of a small vessel, the same scorching planet looming below. The swirling orange dust storms glinted beneath dual suns. His heart pounded with anticipation. It felt surreal, as if he were stepping back into a dream. The ship's AI calmly announced that atmospheric conditions were stable enough for landing. He set the coordinates, remembering the approximate location where he had first encountered the girl. When the landing gear touched down, he felt a jolt of adrenaline. He was no longer a scrawny, 14-year-old kid. He was a seasoned soldier with a well-honed body, steeled nerves, and more courage than he'd had a decade ago. If she was still here, if she recognized him, maybe now he would be worthy of that reward she had hinted at. He left the ship wearing a fitted environment suit, though less bulky than the standard issue gear. The searing heat hit him instantly. Memories flooded back. Thirst, exhaustion, the desperate pounding of his heart when he faced those mercenaries. But that boy was gone. This was the man he had become. 2 kilometers east, the scanner picked up a settlement. Approaching the perimeter, he saw towers of sleek architecture that looked new. It was clear the Australian outpost had grown since his last visit. Guards stood at the gate, armed with advanced rifles. One stepped forward. "Alt human, state your purpose." Jack raised his hands, non-threatening. "I'm looking for someone. A Commander Nalara, or Nara. She might go by either name. She has silver hair, golden orange skin, with intricate markings. I met her 10 years ago. She saved my life." The guard's gaze flickered with recognition. "You speak of Commander Nalara." He lifted a communicator. "Human at the East Gate seeks Commander Nalara. Claims prior acquaintance." Minutes passed as the suns beat down mercilessly. Jack tried to remain calm, though tension coiled in his gut. Then the gates parted, and a figure emerged. His breath caught. She was exactly as he remembered, yet more striking. Tall, poised, wearing a fitted uniform that highlighted her lithe form, silver hair braided elegantly down her back. Her eyes, ringed in purple, locked onto him with a piercing intensity. He barely remembered to breathe. "So," she said in that melodic voice, stepping closer, "you have returned after all." The curve of her lips hinted at satisfaction, though her tone was guarded. "The boy with the rocks." Jack swallowed. "I promised I would come back." She studied him. A decade of personal transformation was etched into his face, from the sharper angles of his jaw to the steadiness in his eyes. She nodded slightly, as if approving. "You've become a man indeed, Jack Harmon. The question is, what kind of man?" He gave a small grin. "I guess we'll find out." Nalara's eyes flashed with the same fascination he'd seen so long ago, yet there was also command in her presence. She turned on her heel. "Cool, mate. We have much to discuss." He followed her into the settlement, noticing curious stares from other Australians. Their skin tones ranged from coppery gold to deep amber, all with luminous markings that pulsed in subtle patterns. "You're a curiosity here," Nalara remarked as they walked. "Humans seldom travel to our outposts uninvited. Few have earned special status." He tried not to stare the way her uniform hugged her figure. "Special status?" She led him to a circular building that seemed ancient, carved with symbols reminiscent of the markings on her skin. Placing her palm on a panel, she watched the doors slide open. Inside, the temperature dropped a few degrees, and a faint blue glow lit the chamber. She moved gracefully, each step measured. "You saved my life 10 years ago," she said, turning to face him. "Among my people, that grants you the right to undertake our trial of ascension." Her gaze flicked to his broad shoulders and the metallic accents of his military suit. "It's a series of tests, physical, mental, spiritual. Normally, only an Australian undergoes them upon reaching adulthood. But there's an ancient law that states any being who rescues an Australian gains the right to attempt the trial." Jack ran a hand through his unruly chestnut hair. "So, that's the reward you hinted at." A slight smile curved her lips. "The reward is the union that follows, if you succeed." She stepped closer, and he caught a trace of her exotic scent, something akin to jasmine, but edged with spice. "It's not a simple marriage as humans define it. We share an essence, a bond. Your mind, your spirit, they become linked to mine. If you fail, you leave with no shame, but no claim to that bond." His heart hammered. In his boyhood fantasies, he'd imagined she meant a kiss or some fleeting romance. This was bigger. It sounded almost sacred or terrifying. "I didn't come all this way just to back out," he finally managed. Her markings glowed faintly, a sure sign of her heightened emotion. "Then I'll show you what awaits. Come at dawn to the Chamber of Reflection." The next morning, the dual suns barely peeked over the horizon when Jack arrived. Nalara stood with 5 elders, each heavily marked with elaborate patterns. A younger Australian male, silver hair cropped short, scowled as Jack approached. "This is Krell," Nalara explained quietly. "He will oversee your first trial." Krell's glare said everything. "The Council may permit this farce," he said, "but I don't accept it. Humans have no place in our sacred rites." Jack stiffened. "I'm not here for your approval, Krell. I'm here because I saved Commander Nalara's life." Krell looked as though he wanted to argue, but an older female elder raised her hand, silencing him. She turned to Jack. "The Chamber of Reflection draws out your inner fears, illusions from your mind. Confront them honestly. If you succeed, you shall proceed." He nodded. Nalara gave him a reassuring glance. Krell sneered as he activated a control panel. The floor lit up with concentric circles, and a cool mist spread across the chamber. Jack exhaled slowly. Seconds later, everything went hazy, the world melting away into a swirl of phantom shapes. He was suddenly on a battlefield, one he knew too well. During his second year in the colonial forces, he'd lost half his squad in an ambush on Proxima Centauri 4. The illusions were so vivid. Smoke, screaming, the stench of burning flesh. He clutched his rifle, hearing his commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, calling for support. Then Reynolds turned to him, eyes haunted with betrayal. You ran, the vision sneered. You left us to die. No. Jack's stomach twisted. He remembered that mission. He had followed orders to retrieve vital intel so that reinforcements could come. But yes, part of him still felt guilty for surviving when so many died. This is just an illusion, he said aloud, reminding himself. I made the best choice I could. If I had stayed, we all would have died. The scene shifted. He was 8 years old, watching his father walk out the front door of their small side apartment. The man's scowl was unforgettable. I have no place here, his father said, throwing a suitcase in the trunk of a waiting car. You're a burden, Jack. The boy in the memory started crying. The father slammed the door, and then he was gone. Jack's adult self stepped forward. You left because you chose to, he said, voice trembling but firm. That was your failure, not mine. The illusion rippled, dissolving into swirling mist. Next came a vision of Nalara, standing among other Australians who laughed cruelly. She pointed at him. Did you think I wanted a human? She scoffed. You're pathetic. Jack felt a pang in his chest. The fear of being unworthy, the dread that she had been mocking him all along. But he recalled how she had looked at him, how she risked letting him attempt this trial. That mocking face was not her. You're not real, he said, clenching his fists. The real Nalara might doubt me, but she wouldn't humiliate me like this. The image contorted, shriveling to gray smoke. Through the haze, Jack caught a glimpse of a strange device embedded in the chamber wall. It pulsed in time with the illusions. Frowning, he moved toward it, ignoring the illusions that tried to reform around him. He yanked the device free. Instantly, the mist cleared. He stood in the chamber, breathing heavily. The elders gaped. Nalara's eyes widened with realization. Krell scowled, stepping back as though he'd been exposed. The eldest elder examined the device. An amplifier, she said, voice cold. It would have intensified the illusions, possibly causing irreversible mental damage. Krell folded his arms. We should test him truly. Let the human face our real traditions, not a watered-down version. That's not your decision, the elder snapped. We will not sabotage a rightful challenger. Guards, remove Krell from these proceedings. 2 armed Australians escorted him away. Jack sensed rage rolling off Krell, but also something else, fear. When the chamber cleared, Nalara approached him with a visible mixture of anger and admiration. You saw through it, and you found a sabotage device. Very few pass this trial without succumbing to their own illusions. He shrugged, adrenaline still pounding in his veins. I guess I know my own demons well enough by now. She reached out, a gentle hand on his arm. Better than many. You are worthy to proceed. The second trial occurred at dusk in the Chamber of Adaptation, a domed area filled with a bizarre microecosystem. The temperature soared even higher than outside, and the air was thick with unfamiliar gases. Strange plants coiled and uncoiled like serpents at the slightest movement. The elder from before explained that Jack must traverse the chamber, retrieve the emblem of ascension from a pillar at the center, and return without any technological assistance. Jack stripped off the environment's suit's more advanced features, leaving only basic protective fabric. Immediately, the heat pressed in on him. The air tasted metallic, biting at his throat and lungs. Even so, he forced himself forward. The ground shifted unexpectedly, as if alive, trying to topple him. Odd fronds reached out, releasing clouds of spores. One puff of spores grazed his cheek, causing a mild burn that made him wince. He pushed onward, wiping sweat from his eyes, stifling coughs. Halfway to the central pillar, he noticed a patch of vegetation that seemed off, a deeper, almost unnatural color. Checking the ground with a small stone, he tossed it over the suspicious area. Instantly, the plant life erupted with acidic spores that disintegrated the rock. Jack's got twisted. That was no natural defense. It had been engineered or enhanced. Only one person sprang to mind. He navigated around it with care. Reaching the central platform, he spotted the glowing crystal that had to be the emblem. He reached out, but before he could grasp it, a section of the chamber wall slid open. Krell stood there, control device in hand, shock crossing his face at being discovered. "Human," he snarled. "You shouldn't have made it this far." Jack lunged for him, but Krell flipped a switch on his device. Alarms blared. Environmental systems screeched as the chamber's atmosphere became dangerously unstable, oxygen mixing with corrosive fumes. The plants and the entire ecosystem began to wither. Jack snatched the emblem, but the swirling gases were too potent. His lungs seized. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. Suddenly, the main entrance slammed open. Nalara, clad in an emergency environment suit, dashed in. She spotted Jack and sprinted toward him, ignoring the lethal vapors that corroded the plants around her. "Jack!" Her voice called through the suit's comm. "We have to go now." "Stop, Krell," he wheezed, fighting for air. "He'll sabotage the settlement next." She hesitated. He could almost see the conflict in her posture. Then, in a move that risked her own life, she tore off her mask and forced it into Jack's hands. "Breathe," she ordered, her own face exposed to the toxic miasma. He gasped the purified air, panic flooding him as he saw her markings flicker under the assault. She pulled him along a maintenance corridor, and the chamber began to collapse behind them. At the far end of the corridor, Krell was fleeing toward the environmental control hub. Nalara staggered, coughing violently. Jack felt fury mixed with fear. He lunged after Krell, each step fueled by a protective instinct for the woman who had risked everything for him. Krell fumbled with a console, presumably trying to override the settlement's main systems. Jack slammed into him, driving a knee into Krell's stomach. The Australian twisted, striking back with surprising strength. They grappled, exchanging blows in the cramped corridor. Finally, Jack wrenched the device from Krell's hand, tossing it aside. "It's over," he hissed. Nalara arrived, face drawn, her golden-orange skin mottled with the toxins. Guards rushed in, subduing Krell. He spat curses, eyes wild with fanatic hatred. "You corrupt our traditions," he shouted. "Humans are not worthy. Our ways must remain pure." He was dragged away. Nalara swayed, a fierce cough racking her body. Jack scooped her into his arms. She felt disturbingly light, her markings dulling to a pale glow. "Where's your medical facility?" he demanded of the nearest Australian guard. The guard pointed, and Jack sprinted. Only later would he realize how seamlessly the guard obeyed him. All that mattered in that moment was saving Nalara. The Australian medical facility was as advanced as any in colonial forces territory, perhaps even more so. Nalara was placed in a regeneration pod filled with luminescent fluid that seemed to dance with the patterns of her skin. The caretaker assured Jack that she would recover. He stood vigil, still clutching the emblem of ascension. From time to time, the elders came by, their expressions a mix of concern and awe. "In all our recorded history," said the eldest elder, "no human has attempted these trials. Fewer still have faced sabotage and prevailed." She looked at the emblem in his hand. "You have retrieved it successfully and at great personal risk. For that, we consider the second trial fulfilled." Jack shrugged, unable to tear his gaze from Nalara. "I don't care about the trials anymore. I only care about her." The elder studied him closely. "That, child, may be the truest testament to your worthiness." 3 days passed. The regeneration fluid slowly restored Nalara's natural glow. Jack never left her side, refusing to rest except in brief doses. Finally, her eyes flickered open, pupils adjusting. She sat up disoriented. When she spotted Jack, relief spread across her face. "You stayed," she murmured, voice raspy but filled with gratitude. "Of course," he replied, heart twisting at the sight of her vulnerable state. "You saved my life in that chamber. This is the least I can do." She offered a faint smile, lifting a hand to his cheek. The contact sent warmth through him, a reminder of that first electric kiss on the scorching planet. "You've done more than enough." Just then, the eldest elder and her council entered. She inclined her head. "Commander Nalara, it gladdens us to see you well. We have concluded that Jack Harmon has more than satisfied the requirements of the second trial." She paused, glancing around at the other elders. However, the final test remains the bonding. Jack frowned. What exactly does that mean? Nalara's gaze turned serious. The bonding is the third trial, the union of essences. It's not just a ceremony. It's a literal joining, body and spirit, that verifies compatibility. If successful, you become part of our collective in a way beyond simple acceptance. You and I would share a connection that surpasses normal understanding. Her eyes flicked to Jack, a mixture of desire and trepidation. It also means you'd be bound to me, and I to you, permanently. The elder cleared her throat. Traditionally, the bonding is private, but given the unprecedented nature of a human attempting it, the council will witness the initial phase to ensure authenticity. She fixed Jack with a solemn stare. Do you accept, knowing it is not reversible? Jack's mind spun, a bond that fused two lives together across species. He glanced at Nalara, recalling her half-joke from so many years ago. Come back when you're a man. He had, and he wanted her in a way that transcended the logic he tried to cling to. This was bigger than curiosity or lust. It was a connection that felt inevitable. I accept, he said, voice steady. Midnight approached. A designated ceremonial chamber glowed with symbols etched into polished stone. Candles, or some alien equivalent, flickered around the perimeter, casting dancing shadows. The elders stood in a semicircle, their robes formal and ornate. Jack wore simpler attire, traditional Australian garb that clung to his muscles and left his arms bare, etched with designs that mirrored the patterns on the chamber walls. Nalara entered, wearing a dress reminiscent of the one she had 10 years ago, albeit more ceremonial, with intricate cutouts revealing her glowing markings. Her silver hair fell loose around her shoulders, shimmering in the chamber's light. Jack had to remind himself to breathe. She met his eyes, and he felt something inside him tighten. This was the moment he had chased for a decade, without truly knowing it. The elder spoke solemnly. We begin the bonding. First, communion of mind. A soft mist curled around their feet. Nalara stepped forward, placing a hand on Jack's chest. He did the same, palm resting over the place where he felt her heart, or hearts, as Australian physiology often had dual systems. The elder intoned words in the Australian tongue, and a gentle hum filled the air. Jack felt the hum in his bones, and then in his mind. Suddenly, he was bombarded with flashes, memories not his own. He saw a child with golden skin running through fields under 3 moons, a stern teacher instructing her in martial arts, an adolescent Nalara earning her first command. All of it streamed into him, bringing a sense of wonder at her experiences, her joys, her sorrows. Simultaneously, he sensed her exploring his own mind, seeing his hardships in the colonial forces, the nightmares he carried from warfare, the unwavering drive to return to her planet. They gasped in unison, reeling from the onslaught. The elder's voice guided them. Do not resist. Let the memories flow. So they did. Past pain, triumph, loneliness, all mingling in an intimate exchange of consciousness. Eventually, the images settled. They opened their eyes, minds still buzzing with each other's presence. The elder nodded. Communion of mind is achieved. Proceed to harmony of spirit. The chamber lights shifted to a deep indigo. Nalara lifted both hands, pressing them against Jack's shoulders. He mirrored her posture. In this second phase, their energies were supposed to synchronize, or so the elders claimed. Jack felt a slow, building warmth spread from his core outward. He realized that the markings on Nalara's skin were flaring brighter. She looked down, inhaling sharply. His own skin, human skin, had begun to glow faintly, as if adopting Australian patterns. A startled murmur rippled among the elders. Impossible, one whispered. Another responded, we have never seen such a direct resonance. Nalara's eyes lifted to Jack's, wonder radiating in their purple rings. It's as if your body is responding to mine, like you were Australian. She cupped his cheek. Your spirit is more open than I ever expected. He felt it too, an effervescent sense of belonging that transcended logic. Maybe we're not as different as we thought. The elders stepped forward. Harmony of spirit is complete. Now, for the final phase, union of essence. Traditionally, the third phase was private. Still, the initial spark had to be publicly witnessed to confirm that the bond truly began. The elders formed a close circle, chanting soft syllables. Nalara leaned in, her voice trembling. "This is a Jack. After this, we'll be bound permanently. Do you want that?" He answered by tilting her chin and pressing his lips to hers. The chamber erupted in shimmering light as their combined markings blazed with energy. He felt her breath hitch, and an electric current surged through both of them. It was unlike anything he had experienced, a melding of physical desire with profound emotional and mental connection. Through the newly formed link, he sensed her astonishment, pleasure, and an underlying relief that he truly did choose her. They broke apart, both breathing unevenly. The elders, clearly taken aback, exchanged glances. The head elder spoke, subdued, awe in her tone. "The bonding has begun. The private consummation is your final step, but already we feel the energy between you. Your union is genuine." She paused, scanning their glowing bodies. "No human has ever manifested our markings before. This is unprecedented." Jack, chest heaving, could hardly process her words. All he knew was that the warmth of Nalara's presence enveloped him, tangling his senses with hers. She took his hand. "Come, we must finish the ceremony in the sanctuary." They moved toward a small door that slid open in the stone wall. Before they could disappear inside, the door to the ceremonial chamber blew off its hinges. Guards stumbled back as Krell and a handful of armed supporters burst in. "This must end," Krell bellowed. "We won't allow a human to corrupt the bloodline of the stars." Guns raised, the intruders advanced. The elders shouted for calm, but Krell's men took aim. Jack stepped forward, reflexes honed by colonial forces training. His own newly awakened markings flared in response to his protective instincts. He felt Nalara's presence surge inside him, guiding him to channel that strange new energy. Together, they raised their hands. A wave of force, partly telekinetic, partly purely emotional, blasted Krell's men off their feet, knocking weapons from their hands. The guns clattered to the floor, useless. The intruders lay sprawled, stunned by the unexpected power. Even Jack was shocked. He stared at his glowing skin, heart pounding. Nalara stood beside him, her markings flickering in synchronization with his own. "In the ancient texts," she whispered, "there are legends of a star. Bond that can bend energy, but I never believed them real." Krell glowered, pinned by a guard who had swiftly recovered. "This is an abomination." The elder stepped forward, voice filled with finality. "No, this is a new path." She looked from Jack to Nalara. "Seize these traitors," she commanded the guards. "Commander Nalara, Jack Harmon, complete the final step of your bonding. We will not allow this sabotage to continue." Krell spat curses, but his men were forced into submission. The elder nodded for Jack and Nalara to proceed. Without hesitation, they slipped into the sanctuary. The sanctuary was softly lit by a haze of blue light, the walls etched with swirling patterns that pulsed gently. Nalara guided Jack to a raised platform lined with plush cushions and draped fabrics. She turned to him, expression both vulnerable and empowered. The swirling energy in the chamber brushed over them like a warm wind. "Whatever happens now," she said softly, "you've shown yourself worthy, not just of me, but of our entire people." Jack brushed a strand of her silver hair back. "I'd face anything to keep you safe." That was true 10 years ago, even if I was just a kid with stones. Her eyes glistened, the purple ring luminous. "You're far more than that boy now." They pressed close, and the rest of the world fell away. The sanctuary's pulsing lights seemed to meld with the rising tempo of their heartbeats. The final moments of the bonding were intimate, a profound sharing that words can't fully describe. Their bodies met, yes, but also their minds and spirits. In that sacred space, they whispered confessions, shared vulnerabilities, fused hopes and fears. Sensory perception blurred. He felt her heartbeat echo within him, and she felt his breath as if it were her own. It lasted for what might have been minutes or hours, time dissolving in the swirl of raw sensation. When at last they emerged, they glowed with a unified resonance. Markings now adorned Jack's arms and torso, faint but unmistakable. The lines mirrored some of Nalara's patterns, though shaped by his own human physiology. She traced them with wonder, and he returned the gesture. For all the physical closeness, the deeper astonishment was the mental link they shared. He could sense the edges of her thoughts, her presence a warm pulse in the back of his mind. Hand in hand, they left the sanctuary. The elders waited, a reverent hush falling over the chamber. Even some of the previously skeptical council members now wore expressions of awe. The head elder stepped forward. "It is done. You are bonded, and the power of your union has been witnessed by all. May this herald a new era for both our species." In the following weeks, the shockwaves of that union spread beyond the settlement. Word reached human territories about a colonial forces soldier who had successfully undergone an alien bonding ritual. Diplomats began arriving on the planet, curious about the potential for stronger alliances. Australian leaders, once apprehensive about outsiders, listened more closely after witnessing how Jack risked his life for Nalara, someone their own tradition recognized as a rightful mate and partner. Jack and Nalara stood at the forefront of these talks, bridging cultural gaps. He discovered that he could sense subtle emotional shifts in the Australian representatives, reading their intangible signals. Likewise, Nalara picked up on human social cues more deftly than any of her peers, thanks to her bond with Jack. Some older Australian conservatives still muttered about tainted blood, but their voices grew quieter as the settlement thrived and new trade agreements blossomed. High-level officials from Earth and the Australian homeworld convened on a neutral orbital station to sign a historic treaty. Jack found himself wearing a formal uniform once again, though the new lines etched on his skin were proudly visible. Nalara wore an elegant black dress that evoked memories of their first meeting, complete with swirling silver accents that match her hair. "They're calling us the bridge between stars," Jack murmured, reading a holographic news headline. "I can't say I ever expected that when I was chucking stones at mercenaries." Nalara laughed, a soft musical sound that lit up his senses through their bond. "I never expected it either, the day I felt so cornered and alone that I thought I wouldn't survive. Then a scrawny boy risked his life for me, and everything changed." They joined dignitaries on a broad observation deck. Earth rotated below, a bright blue sphere. Standing side by side, they pressed their thumbprints onto a treaty pad, his normal human thumb, hers an Australian print that glowed when it touched the scanner. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered from onlookers. Under the surface glamour, Jack sensed the sincere relief from both sides. A new era had begun. As the ceremony wrapped up, an aide informed them that they would be asked to say a few words for a broadcast. Usually, Jack dreaded public speaking, but with Nalara by his side, he felt unshakable confidence. He took the small stage. Around him, the station's interior glimmered with advanced technology from both species. High-ranking military officers, ambassadors, and reporters crowded in. He thought back to that scorching planet, the boy he was, the battered set of rocks he used to ward off danger. It felt like a lifetime ago. "My friends," he began, voice carrying across the hush, "I grew up believing that humanity's greatest victories were in conquering new frontiers. But 10 years ago, I learned there's more to the universe than territory. Sometimes the greatest frontier is understanding another being. We stand here today because an Australian girl gave me a chance to be more than I was, told me to return when I was a man. Over time, I learned that her words weren't just a challenge. They were a promise. And that promise has led to a bond between our peoples that I hope will last generations." He paused, feeling Nalara's comforting presence in his mind, urging him forward. All it took was some courage, some faith, and yes, maybe a little foolishness. Our two species might look different, but in essence, we share the same desires: safety, prosperity, and the freedom to love. If my story proves anything, it's that even a single act of bravery can open the door to incredible possibilities. He stepped aside. Nalara offered him a soft smile as she approached the microphone. On behalf of the Australian people, she said, voice rich with emotion, I echo Jack's sentiment. We have long held onto traditions to protect our ways. Some, like Krell, believe these traditions would be lost if we opened our borders. But I have found that traditions can evolve, and in doing so, they can grow stronger. Jack Harmon did more than rescue me 10 years ago. He awakened in me a profound conviction that we are not meant to remain isolated. And through our bonding, we have confirmed that difference need not be division. Together, we create something new, something that bridges our worlds. The applause swelled, echoing in the station's grand hall. Within Jack's mind, he felt Nalara's grateful pride wash through him like a warm tide. They had accomplished what so many had believed impossible. 1 year later, they lived on a colony world in the Alpha Centauri system, a compromised location. It was neither wholly human nor wholly Australian, but a place where both species had begun to settle side by side. Their home was perched on a cliff overlooking a brilliant turquoise ocean on one side and a sprawling ruddy desert on the other, a subtle symbol of the dual suns Jack remembered so well. The dwelling's architecture blended human comforts, soft furniture, wooden paneling, old books from Earth, and Australian elegance, like glowing stone corridors and responsive lighting that pulsed in time with the occupant's emotional state. Jack opened a wide window each morning to gaze at the horizon, where two suns would sometimes appear side by side. He thought it was the perfect metaphor for them, separate but forever drawn into the same sky. Happy anniversary, he said one such morning, turning to find Nalara approaching with a slow, serene grace. She wore a casual wrap that revealed the swirling markings on her arms, which glowed faintly. The silver of her hair now held a few braided ornaments that sparkled in the morning light. She tilted her head, amused. Which one? She teased. We have so many. Earth date, Australian date, the date of our bonding ceremony, the date of the treaty signing. He chuckled, crossing the distance to pull her into his arms. All of them. Every day with you is a celebration. Her laughter chimed like bells. Smooth talker, but the affection in her eyes was unmistakable. She leaned against him, brushing her fingertips across the markings that now adorned his forearms. They had grown more pronounced over the year, forming delicate whorls and lines that matched her own. Sometimes, if he closed his eyes, he could feel subtle shifts in her mood even before she spoke. The bond between them had deepened to a level neither had predicted. They were content to stand there for a moment, simply enjoying the sense of each other. Outside the large window, a colony transport soared by, heading to the desert outpost. The colony was thriving, with both human and Australian technologies combining to create innovative solutions for living in such an environment. Many said their union had set the tone, that if a single couple could merge two worlds, so could the rest of them. Nalara reached into a small pouch at her waist, revealing a polished shell-like object. Its surface shimmered with turquoise and gold. I found this on the beach last night, she said, offering it to him. It reminded me of your eyes. Consider it a gift for yet another anniversary. He took it, smiling. Thank you. I have. Something for you, too. He produced a slender bracelet crafted from interwoven metals, one from Earth, one from the Australian homeworld. He had hammered them himself in the colony's workshop, learning from an Australian artisan. The result was a delicate band with swirling designs that resembled their bonded markings. Nalara's eyes widened in delight. It's beautiful. She slipped it on, and the metal glowed softly as it made contact with her skin. Not as beautiful as you, he said, tucking a strand of silver hair behind her ear. The bond thrummed with affection, echoing between them. But maybe it'll serve as a reminder of how far we've come. She closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to his. Through the bond, he sensed her gratitude and love, mingled with the memory of that frightened girl pinned against the cliff face a decade ago. She sent him a fleeting mental image of how she had viewed him then, scrawny, trembling, but eyes burning with righteous courage. He responded by projecting how he saw her the first time, radiant, fierce, and entirely otherworldly. A beep from the dwelling's communication panel interrupted them. Sighing, Nalara stepped away to check the incoming message. It was from the Colonies Council, requesting their presence later in the day. Something about finalizing the new education initiative, she surmised, integrating both languages into the local school curriculum. Jack nodded. "We'll handle it." He stretched, feeling an ache from yesterday's training session with a group of new recruits. He had taken on a role as a joint instructor for colonial forces and Australian defenders, teaching them how to work together effectively. Despite the peace treaty, there were always potential threats: pirates, smugglers, and extremist factions like Krell's old allies who refused to accept the Union. "Are you all right?" Nalara asked, sensing his twinge of discomfort. "Just stiff," he admitted, "but I'm good." He paused. "In fact, I'm better than good." A gentle smile graced her lips. "I feel it," she whispered, tapping her temple, referencing their bond. "I'm glad." He caught her hand. "Sometimes, I still marvel at it all. A decade ago, I was a lost kid on a scorching planet, throwing rocks at armed thugs. Now I'm, well, here, with you, building a life that bridges worlds." She nodded, eyes reflecting the golden morning light. "I remember that day vividly. I was so certain I wouldn't make it out alive. Then you appeared, yelling with that cracking voice, 'Hey, ugly,' while hurling stones. It was the bravest, silliest, most incredible thing I'd ever witnessed." He laughed. "I can't believe I yelled that." My voice was still changing. Nalara's grin softened into a more serious expression. "But it changed everything. Sometimes a single moment can redefine a life. Yours, mine, our people's." She squeezed his hand. "I'm eternally grateful you took that risk." He leaned in, brushing his lips against hers in a slow, tender kiss. Their markings responded, glowing softly. It was a quiet moment, free of chaos and danger, a reminder that love can flourish even in a universe filled with storms. Later, they strolled through the colony's main promenade, greeting humans and Australians alike. Children ran past, some fully human, some fully Australian, and some whose features suggested mixed heritage. The elders had been uncertain about the viability of such unions, but a few couples had formed in the wake of Jack and Alara's example, forging new family lines that fascinated xenobiologists from both worlds. Often, children of these unions displayed mild versions of the luminous markings, albeit in unpredictable patterns. Near a fountain made of polished black stone and inscribed with Australian glyphs, Jack spotted a toddler squealing in delight as she tried to catch glowing insects flitting just above the water. Her mother, a human woman with cropped red hair, hovered protectively. Her father, an Australian with copper-colored skin and bright teal markings, offered gentle encouragement. Jack saw a reflection of hope in that family, a future where differences were not just tolerated, but celebrated. They arrived at the council building, a sleek structure combining elements of both architectural styles. Inside, officials greeted them warmly. Discussions ensued about budget allocations for bilingual teachers, the import of Earth books, the expansion of Australian historical archives. Jack contributed suggestions on how to make the curriculum engaging for children of both species, while Nalara outlined the significance of certain Australian rights that might be respectfully taught without cultural misappropriation. Hours later, they emerged from the meeting, mentally fatigued but satisfied. The sun was setting, two suns actually painting the sky in ribbons of gold, pink, and violet. It was a sight that would never cease to enthrall him. In the quiet hush of twilight, he and Nalara walked hand in hand along a cliffside path. Far below, waves pounded against rocky formations, sending up columns of white foam. He paused at a particular overlook, one from which both suns were visible in their final descent. She leaned against him. "Do you remember the vision we had during the bonding?" she asked softly. "Where we saw possible futures, some terrifying, others filled with hope." Jack nodded, recalling how one vision showed them older, standing on a cliff with children gathered around. I do. She inhaled the salty breeze. I think about those glimpses sometimes, how they might yet unfold. I don't know if we'll ever have children like the vision suggested, or if we'll just be ambassadors, forging alliances. But I do know one thing. She turned to look at him, the purple rings in her eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. Everything is better when we face it together. He rested his forehead against hers. Agreed. We've tackled sabotage, near-death experiences, and interstellar politics. I'd say we can handle whatever else the galaxy throws at us. They shared a soft laugh. Then, as the second sun slipped below the horizon, he recalled something from that fateful day a decade ago. You whispered something in my ear after you kissed my cheek. I was half delirious at the time, so I never quite caught the exact words. I always thought it was come back to me when you're older, and I'll give you a reward. But sometimes it felt like a dream. Was that really what you said? Nalara's lips curved in a playful smile. Yes, those were more or less my words in human standard. My accent was poorer back then, but I meant it. And here you are, older, and I'd like to believe wiser. He nodded, a surge of tenderness welling in his chest. So, was the reward worth it? Her markings flared softly against the gathering darkness. Absolutely. For both of us. They stood there, watching the skies deepen into twilight. The air cooled, carrying the gentle hush of wind over the cliffs. Beneath the starlight, their bond pulsed with mutual warmth. A boy's wild gamble to save an alien girl had become a catalyst for interstellar unity. And for them personally, it had forged an unbreakable link that transcended species, distances, and the barriers of tradition. Neither could say what the future held. Perhaps more trials, perhaps a life of relative peace and diplomacy. Yet as Jack held Nalara close, feeling her steady heartbeat echo in his own mind, he knew there was no challenge they couldn't face together. In that moment, they were simply two souls entwined under the canopy of a limitless universe, grateful for the love that had drawn them across the stars.